I'm Yolanda Cope-Stepney and you're listening to Speak On, a podcast where we discuss society, culture, well-being and more.
If you're listening to this in 2021, it's 2020. We're post-murder hornets and pre-Skynet taking over the world. The world has changed so much and that has been discombobulating for many, but amongst those greatly affected are influencers. Don't know what that is? People with a large following online that showcase snapshots of their days, lifestyle, thoughts, etc. But is influencer a dirty word? What do they do really? Have they changed the world? What do they contribute? With the teen locking us inside for a huge chunk of the year and us reevaluating pretty much everything, will influencers and celebrities be relevant in a post-Rona world? This episode isn't brought to you by Teeth Whitening, Waist Training, Skinny Tea Limited, that I quote-unquote am obsessed with. This episode is brought to you by someone who owns a media agency that manages influencers and the influencer's influencer, the influencer whisperer, blogger, entrepreneur and owner of Grow and Glow, and I'm adding activist to her title because she is a phenomenal ally, Vix Meldrew. Hey Vix.
Oh my gosh, I actually got like little goosebumps when I heard that intro then. I was like, here I am. Oh, hello. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much for coming on. It's so lovely to speak to you. We've spoken so much online in true kind of as the way people kind of communicate now, just messaging each other on Instagram.
Yeah, we're just fangirling over one another.
Wicked. So, okay, I'm going to start with our title question. Will influencers and celebrities be as relevant post-pandemic? What do you think?
I think there's a certain group of influencers that will be even more relevant than they were going into 2020. And there will definitely be some that, in my eyes, have never been relevant. But I think and I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean, and we'll get into, why I believe that in a bit. But I think that 2020 has really been that year where the world's perception of life has changed through Corona, through Black Lives Matter and everything that's been happening this past month or so. There's been a huge awakening for a certain group of people, and then there's been a huge swell of feeling and fight and fear and all of these huge emotions that some online content creators and what they were doing beforehand just feels like it doesn't matter in a way.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like everything I feel like we're only halfway through the year and we have no idea what's going to happen next. But I feel like it could be everything that's ever happened in the history of time is kind of reaching a boiling point this year. So what do you think is going to change for influencers? So you mentioned like the kind of people that will survive this. Who do you think they are?
I think that ever since I've been in the kind of influencer industry, there's been people that stand for something. And when I mean stand for something, I don't care whether it's the fact that you stand for your right to love Marvel films or you stand for a specific cause. Those people that have always used their platforms to connect to people over something that they stand for are going to become even more relevant, because their influence isn't that they're influencing people to be more capitalistic than they were before or to be bigger consumers than they were before, but they influence people to think and to talk and to discuss and to learn about whatever cause it is that they get behind. And I think that these past few months have shown just how important that is. Whereas influencers before, as you said in your intro, that just held up those gummies to a selfie camera and told people to eat them even though they're going to make you shit yourself. I think people, sat at home for these last few months where there's no need to take detox gummy teas or care about what other people are up to or experience that FOMO of other people getting stuff and going on holiday, has really shown people that what was bothering them before about the kind of influencer world, or even what was inspiring them before about the influencer world, a lot of it means jack shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a wild time. Remember at the beginning of lockdown, one of my friends actually said, I'm actually just kind of looking forward to like being on Instagram and kind of being on Twitter. And I was like, why? I was like, why is that? What are you expecting to see? Just pictures of people in their houses? And she said, no, she goes, I'm expecting to see some people reacting really interestingly to like a lack of attention and the lack of being able to have that kind of routine of going to parties and doing stuff, and that's what all their content and all their kind of life revolves around. She goes, I wonder what those people do when they're not getting that kind of attention, because we're all recentering and refocusing on what is actually really important about life. And I was like, wow. 100%. She said this like in March, just before we'd locked down properly here, and I feel you've definitely seen some really interesting content from celebrities and influencers in this time. Some people have become, especially comedians, have really come into their own and have become, you know, kind of really satirical, and they're kind of socially conscious, etc., and have been getting us through. And then other people have just gone a bit crazy.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people kind of, especially at the beginning, turn into a bit of a panic kind of meltdown of, oh no, I won't have a new outfit to wear on the streets of London every day of the week. What am I going to do? That kind of panic. And then there's some people whose content, okay, it might have been fashion, it may have been beauty, it may have been travel, and it may have been that kind of content that we're talking about before, but have almost had a sort of light bulb moment switched on where they've gone, okay, I can't do that anymore, or it's not going to be interesting to people anymore. So what am I going to be able to do that's actually valuable, and what do people need right now? And they've kind of pivoted their content away from it, which I think, yeah, fair enough, well done. And then there's other people that have been here the whole time, who've been either activists or educators or creating content of value for their audience, that have just been able to come into their own even more, because there's now so many more people around to kind of consume it. So it's been interesting how some people have adapted and evolved, and some have panicked really over what their platforms are going to become.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's definitely started to separate the influencers and the content creators. And I feel like the content creators are key at this point, because they're the people that are getting us through lockdown, whether they're just being interesting, like you're saying, educational, really, really funny, or just so creative, and they're creating things that are so beautiful to look at. And then there are other people that I think, like you were saying, if they're holding up the gummies, etc., then I don't know, what are they doing now?
I find it quite funny as well how often the people that are the least influential are the ones that we call influencers. If we think of like a stereotypical influencer in our mind, and we can imagine what they look like, the type of content they create, all of the things that give the kind of influencer industry its bad name or make it the dirty word, if we actually think about those people, they're often the ones that have the least influence. Whereas the ones who are kind of like, I'm a content creator, I create content of value, I build a community, I want to engage with my audience and serve them with as much value as possible, they're often the ones that are the most influential, but they want to distance themselves from being called an influencer. Yes. I find that interesting.
It really is. It's like I've had an agency since 2016, and so I've been there from the beginning of trying to convince brands that to kind of work with anyone at all, particularly women of colour, because when I started my agency, no one would sign influencers of colour at all. So when I started my agency, I ended up with basically a lot of BAME influencers, even though I don't really like the term BAME, but that was kind of my whole roster. And it's been an uphill struggle trying to get brands to work with them. But also it's been a struggle to help those influencers and content creators grow, because I was really clear at the beginning. I was like, there's going to be influencers and there's going to be content creators, and you want to be in the content creator category because that's where you're going to get your longevity. And then that's also going to be more fun for you. Because I've seen, I don't know, I feel like there's a whole other kind of talk that we should have about this on another episode, about kind of the mental health aspect of all this and what it does, what it can do to you. But it's definitely been an interesting, I suppose, landscape to look at. And I see on your channels, it's brilliant. You are kind of lifting the lid and you are talking about, this is what you should be doing. Here's the interesting thing about influencers. Here's how to be a content creator. If you could talk about your channel, what is it that you share and what is it that you do and give to influencers?
Yeah, do you know what the funny thing is, actually, that this has only been it's been something that I've been talking about across all of my channels for the last 2 to 3 years, but it's something that I've only honed in on in the last couple of months. Because before, I saw myself as a content creator who worked with brands and who was looking for sponsorships and wanted that kind of side of my business, as well as my personal brand around Grow and Glow and the educating side of the business. And actually, it's funny that the growth has come when I've really leaned into the value, the education and lifting the lid.
Yeah.
And the growth wasn't there when I was doing the ads and I was, kind of doing a bit more stereotypically influencery kind of thing. So that in itself is testament to what we're talking about. But yeah, essentially, I used to be a primary school teacher.
No way.
I left. Yeah, I was a primary school teacher for 6 years. And during teaching, I started a blog, and it was all about dating and relationships because I was newly single. And it kind of grew from there, being sort of like single girl in London. And I just loved it. I loved building a community. I loved being on social media. I loved writing. I loved all of that kind of side of it. And I was getting disillusioned with teaching in the education system. So I thought, I need to leave teaching. I want to do blogging full time. So that's what I did. And then because I did it in a way that was like, I built a community, they supported me. I did it kind of like in a sustainable and slow way. I didn't just churn out 17 adverts a week kind of thing.
Yeah.
Other people came to me and like, Vix, if you've done it, like, can you teach us how to do it? So that's how that kind of thing started. And I sort of used to coach some brilliant creators that are now also going full time and growing their platforms, which is brilliant. And then, yeah, I just had a lot of people asking for coaching, and I decided that coaching wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach on a wider scale again. So then I launched my membership, which is Grow and Glow. And then from there, really, I kind of get called upon as the sort of person to go to, because I'll always just tell you straight, and I'll always try and be as transparent as possible in an industry that can often be quite secretive and quite cliquey and quite, gatekeeping of information. I just wanted to be that person that was like, well, no one else is going to tell you, so I will, kind of thing. And now, that's what I use my platforms for. We've got Grow and Glow, which teaches content creators how to build a personal brand through everything to do with personal branding. So content strategy, finding your niche, sales, scaling, all that kind of stuff. And then over on my Vix Meldrew platform, just giving more of a behind the scenes look into the influencer industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. And I love your channel. And it's I've actually stumbled across it through all the Black Lives Matter content and saw that you were posting about, this is what we can do as white influencers to kind of help like Black people, help people of colour, etc. So where did that particular like kind of activism side of you, because you said you've been talking about this for a while, but now everybody's finally paying attention to that part of your teaching, I guess.
I think one of the things, because I entered the kind of creator industry as an adult, I was like 26 or 28 or something when I started blogging, and coming from a teaching background, and coming from a background that was, as a teacher, being super inclusive and super progressive and wanting to teach my children about tolerance and understanding and equality. Coming into an industry where I was like, wow, everyone is white middle class.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't feel at home here, because I feel at home in inclusive kind of spaces. And then as I started coaching different creators, I was coaching creators from all backgrounds, and I could really see the difference in their struggles and what blocks different creators were coming up against. And often it was because of how they looked, or what race they were, or what personality they had, or if they had a special need, for example. Like, I've worked with some autistic creators. They all had different struggles, and I thought, wow, we really need to be making these platforms as accessible to everyone, because everyone has Instagram. But if influencers were predominantly kind of white middle class, then a lot of people were going to find themselves not represented in the creators that they wanted to follow. Very similar with celebrities often, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't really find someone that you can really relate to. And I wanted to just try and, every creator that I work with on a coaching basis, I wanted to give them the world. I wanted to open all of the doors for them. And I was finding how it was becoming difficult. So it was just kind of like listening to different people's stories and different people's struggles, hearing what they were saying around the problems that they were facing, and thinking to myself, okay, well, how can I use my position in the industry, in that I have PR contacts, industry contacts, I've talked on these panels, I've been to these events, I know all of these different people. How can I use my position with all of that information to try and problem solve and try and hear what the problems are and see if we can come up with some solutions. So I brought together a team of creators from across the UK, all different sizes, from nano influencers up to macro influencers. And we had a big old chat, and I listened to what their problems were, what, you know, issues they were facing. And as a kind of collective group, we talked about what we can affect right here, right now, what we can affect on a long-term basis, and kind of put all our heads together and came up with some ideas. And then from there, really, I've just started to make content that hopefully can be shared around as widely as possible, to start putting some of these solutions into place.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it. I love the content. I love the content you've been showing. I love the honesty, because again, working in that kind of part of the industry sector myself, it was every time I told anyone the truth, I don't think they entirely believed me, because I'm not an influencer at all. I'm older. I'm the corporate side of it, but because I am an old school PR marketing, I say old school, I'm not that old actually, I should take that back. I just have worked in PR marketing for a while. We sit on the side of being the original content creators, because we've worked on adverts that have gone out globally. We've been encouraging people to buy things that they don't need for literally all our careers. And when I used to tell my influencers a lot of this stuff, I don't think they believed me. They thought that something just wasn't happening behind the scenes, because some of them, like you were saying, you've gone into being an influencer as an adult. So you've lived and worked in a corporate working world. And some of the influencers coming up, they haven't. So this is like brand new information that these things can even happen, because they haven't been through the corporate working machine to see how systemic racism, prejudice, etc. works outside of maybe the framework of school, essentially. So I think it's amazing that you're kind of not just lifting the lid. It's about the work that you're doing is actually helping to even out the playing field. And it's like, here's the information, exactly here's everything, and here's how you can use it to move forward in a meaningful and positive way. And I'm really enjoying it. So this is just me fangirling for no reason. It's not even a question in here. It's just me saying I love it.
And I think when I first started, I very much felt like an outsider. I wasn't like one of the popular gals, you know, it all was very cliquey when I first joined. And I was lucky as I grew my platforms that I made some really good friends and really good connections who could open up other doors for me that I wouldn't have been able to necessarily get myself. And that's how I kind of see it. It's a very kind of gatekeeping industry where, because of competition, everyone wants to keep everything for themselves, and they're afraid that if they tell somebody a secret or tell somebody a contact or a bit of information, that person's going to take over them. Whereas my kind of view is exactly what you said, is that there's a level playing field, so that the only thing you're judged on is the quality of your content and the engagement of your community. It's not about who knows who and who knows what information. So that's what Grow and Glow was founded on, was just transparency. I am lucky to be in the position where I know information and I have contacts that I can ask a question to, and I've got the initiative to phone somebody and get to the bottom of things. And some people don't have the time or the confidence or whatever to do the same thing. So better to hear it kind of from me, where I can give it to you as simply in my old kind of teachery way of breaking down things as possible. And just like you said, lift the lid for people that might not have the keys to the door in other ways. Okay,
I have a question. So if you were, I don't know if you get this, I get this a lot when I say to people, I have a media agency, and one of the things we do is that we work with influencers, blah, blah. Some people are like, okay, yeah, cool, I think I understand what that means. Some roll their eyes and make a lot of comments. And others are like, what is an influencer? How would you describe an influencer?
So this is that thing as well where we're going back to influencers versus content creators, because I do get a bit salty about the certain type of influencer who starts up an Instagram because they want to make money or because they want free shit and decide that they're going to do whatever it means necessary to just get free stuff and to go to the parties and just use their platforms for sort of capitalistic reasons. But then I see another type of influencer who wants to build a personal, sustainable brand and business, and knows that to do that they need a solid content strategy and a fully engaged audience, so they use their platforms to build their influence because they have something that they want to offer, serve, So that's my kind of two definitions of influencers, and I think that often the term influencer muddies those two together, which is something that hopefully will start to change. You know, as we said, as we come out of a post-Rona world and we start to see a bit more of a separation. And it comes down to exposure and education. You know, the more people follow the kind of stereotypical influencer, like the ex-reality star who's just holding up the, you know, car air fresheners or whatever they sell nowadays,
car air fresheners. Yeah.
Then, you know, but hopefully the work that's been going on at the moment is to platform these amazing people who are so articulate, are so valuable, so useful, and have such an amazing message to share. The more we can platform those people, hopefully the more people will understand, that's what an influencer is.
Yes.
They're influencing me to think and act and change, rather than to buy a car air freshener for 15% off or whatever.
I love that you're really not about the car air fresheners right now, are you?
That's the image in my mind. I was like, what's the last thing I saw a reality star advertised that blew my mind? It was a car air freshener.
Those make me laugh. I think one of the like kind of responses I get when I'm trying to describe what an influencer is, content creators, etc. I often get people saying, "Oh, do you know who should be the real influencers? Scientists." And things like that. And obviously there was a point where there are some scientist influencers. There's a Dr. Maya Warren, who is an ice cream scientist. I am obsessed with her. And I actually mean that not in an influencer way. Like, I genuinely go on every single day and watch every video she produces and message her way too much, far more than normal. But now that we are in this kind of newer world, have you seen that there's that kind of increase in these kind of science and doctor influencers who are sharing really valuable information, not just always Rona related, but as we start to shift what we feel is important? Have you seen that kind of bump up and those people gain relevance?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one account that I even think of is Simple Politics.
Yes.
You don't even really know the people behind that account, but it's so influential in how they deliver their content and how valuable they are, that, you know, they could release a book and they could release this, that and the other, and it will fly off the shelves. But yeah, scientists, doctors, nurses, people that are talking about something that they are super specialised in, that's valuable for a wide range of people, and sometimes even just a really niche range of people, but it's so valuable to that group of people, are really coming out on their own. Because it feels like, as content consumers, especially around Corona, I think before that, you know, we'd gotten to that point where seeing an influencer on another holiday, or getting another PR package, or you know, another free car or something like that, had really started to wear people down and make people feel so awful. Whereas, because of those creators couldn't really create that content during coronavirus, it would be too tacky, or the opportunity just wasn't there. It's given space for people to come in. You know, and you've got people that are calligraphers, or they are scientists, or they're really good at baking, and they're sharing content that is so safe and nice and happy and lovely for people to consume, because it doesn't make them feel awful. And it's so valuable. It's things to learn from, and especially I love the rise of the academic influencer is something that I really, really love. And like you were saying, Simple Politics, shit you should care about, those kind of things. I'm living for it. And even Kobe Eats, that little boy that just makes food with his mum. I watched that, like, he's got, when I started following, it wasn't even that long ago, he was on maybe like 1 million followers. Now I think he's on like 2, because it's just pure joy just watching this kid throwing ingredients into a pot, and then every time it comes to adding cheese, he just shoves it in his mouth instead of adding it to the ingredients. And I think, 100%. I think that going forward, they're the content creators, and they're the influencers that I think are going to still continue to resonate. So for other influencers who are not necessarily content creators or creating content at this time, do you think that they will still be able to maintain their audiences, or do you think they're still going to be as influential going forward if they're not adapting? I think that's a really tough one to kind of predict. Before I spoke to that group of creators, I phoned loads of my contacts within the industry on the PR side to talk about Black Lives Matter and what they were doing, and what information I could pass from them to creators to create sort of like a symbiotic message where we're all working together. And I spoke to them about, you know, what's going to be the state of the influencer world after this, and every single one of them has said, you know, if we didn't know it before, we bloody know now that we need to be selecting influencers that have values, that values are clear through every single piece of content they have, because it's almost becoming to that fever pitch where, especially for influencers as well, it's too dangerous not to align yourself with a brand that has value.
Yes.
So, and I think from the brand side, they're starting to wake up to it as well. It's going to be too dangerous for them to align themselves with an influencer that doesn't have values, that isn't kind of standing for something. You know, did they stay quiet during BLM? Did they stay you know, did they still put out content that was making people feel awful during coronavirus? Like, can they align themselves with those people anymore?
Yeah.
With the fear of, you know, being air quotes cancelled, or, you know, that kind of thing. So every person that I spoke to on that side of the industry said, moving forward, we're going to be looking so much more clearly into what our creators stand for.
Yes.
And assuring that they have values. And then it's always that thing of like oversaturation of the market. Creators that are going to come out of this on top are the ones that have got really defined USPs, that they are a specialist in something, or they have a defined audience of something, because the just choice there is just too many. There's just no point in choosing 15 of the same influencer, which is what
Yes.
we used to see in campaigns. You know, because I remember a campaign a couple of years ago, and it literally had 15 of the exact same influencer.
Yep.
And yes, they might have had 20,000, 200,000, 100,000 followers, but the same people followed all of those people.
Yeah.
So they didn't get
That
like
Venn
an
diagram
audience
was a
of 2
circle,
million.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't get a new like reach of 2 million. They got a reach of 20,000 because it was like all the same people. And I think brands are wisening up to that now and going, okay, right, we want to hit, you know, all of these different markets, and we want this huge range of voices, ideas and values that all sum up and all what make our brand what it is. And I just really strongly kind of teach my creators within Grow and Glow, and this is what I'm using my platform to teach, is from the influencer side, be pickier about the brands you're working with.
Yes.
Be super picky about who you're working with. And then from the brand side, when I talk to them and I consult with them about influencers, be bloody pickier with who you're working with.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping, whether that's a message that will sink in now, or it might take another 6 months, or it might take a year, I hope that out of this, brands and influencers are much more aligned with values and therefore are much more pickier about who they choose to work with, so that we do see people platforming, growing their platforms and working with brands who are brilliant at everything. And we see a lot less opportunity for you know, just people who've got a big following, shall we say.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we're talking about, you mentioned before, macro influencers, you know, anyone that's listening that doesn't understand that. So nano, they are the smaller influencers with a smaller following, but they have a really engaged audience as well, so they have so much value. And macro is, you know, Selena Gomez kind of thing. So it goes right up to having a few thousand to literally being the most followed person on Instagram. But I think, I'm really looking forward actually to seeing what happens next. And I think there is I think just the Rona in general has provided a watershed moment for so many things. And especially with brands starting to, like you're saying, realign their values, be pickier, because we've seen so many people that have created so many faux pas and still been given loads of money by brands to front things, and they are overtly kind of, could be racist, sexist, insensitive. And I think it's time to be pickier, because also what we see now is what happens when people vote with their feet, and what happens when people are collectively shouting with one voice on social media, and how that can affect a brand. So I'm definitely interested in seeing that, and I'm interested in seeing where content creators go next, because it's exciting. It's an exciting time for those kind of people that are creating really good, solid content. And I suppose we'll see what happens in terms of like the diversity and like kind of, and how inclusive brands are going to be, because like I said at the beginning, when I started my agency, it was hellish. We couldn't get invites to parties. We couldn't get paid work. There were a few brands that were really solid from the beginning, from the get-go. They were like, yes, we want to work with you. Come to these events. Here is gifting, or like, you know, here's samples, because I used to work in like PR and journalism. So here are, you know, samples. Here are trips. here are paid campaigns, here are things we want you to do. And also they were really transparent. I could see with the pricing, because I did have a diverse roster, I could see they were paying equally. But then also I've seen people just shamelessly offer a little bit of money for one race over another race. You know, I've seen kind of the disparities. And when I've tried to talk to brands about that, I either get, you know, don't get a very positive response, or they just ignore you, or they just stop working with you. So it's great as well that I love that you've got this platform where you're being really open and honest, encouraging people to be, and this moment in time is encouraging honesty, because because brands can't turn away from these really important questions anymore, and they have to
Definitely
start being held accountable, and also start looking at themselves too.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like before this kind of thing, the world pretty much, but definitely especially in this industry, creators and brands didn't ever, on the majority, wouldn't either be actively anti-racist, but wouldn't be actively racist or actively homophobic, but they'd sit in that comfortable middle where they could say things like, she's not my vibe, or her reach isn't right, or so and so. Which we all know it's just they didn't want to work with a black creator, for example, but they could get away with it by saying, you know, oh, it just doesn't really fit with our brand, or so and so.
Yeah.
Whereas actually creating this content and open this conversation really is challenging for influencers and brands to say, okay, if you're not actively anti-racist and you're not actively racist, sitting in the middle isn't good enough anymore. Yeah. You have to show your values, and you have to show what you stand for and what you don't stand for, because otherwise it's almost like you're on the wrong side of history. And every event that I do, every podcast that I speak on, like everything that I do, I talk about a legacy for content creators and influencers. What do you want your legacy to be? If it comes to it at the end and you've got a gravestone hanging in the graveyard, do you want it to say, had really good swipe up affiliate links? Or do you want, you know, sold car air fresheners really well? Yeah. Or do you want it to say, use their platform that they work tirelessly to grow to influence people to change and think for the better? Yes. And I think that now more than ever, that's so much more obvious that we need to be thinking about those legacies and almost like what side of history do we want to be on?
Absolutely. And I think as well, just about what I suppose you can sit comfortably with. And I get it, it's like, you know, it's a super competitive space, and if, you know, not everybody's a strong content creator, and what you were saying about brands and their kind of coded language of doesn't really fit this campaign, things I've heard a million times, even things actually, sorry, this person's too photoshopped. They've actually said that, a brand said that once about one of my creators. I didn't send them a photoshopped image. I just sent them an image, and I actually got my influencer to send a picture, like literally take a selfie there and then, send it to me for me to send to the brand for them to see it alongside it. And because I think I feel as well, I've always been a fairly gobby, I actually responded with, black girls can just be this beautiful, you know.
Nice.
And they were so offended that I said it, and they were like, you have no idea I understand more than you'd realise, blah blah. And I was like, no, I know, I've seen what you look like, I know who you are online, I know what you're saying, because it's coded language I've heard myself as I've grown up. And I was like, that's fine, we don't need to work with you. And then I just told all my influencers, if these people contact you, do not work with them. So it's kind of, at times it's financially shooting ourselves in the foot, but then also, like you're saying, you have to look at what you want to be aligned with, who you want to work with, and kind of what value you want to have, and also I suppose what you want to show your followers as well, like where are your principles, where do you stand? And obviously these kind of diversity and inclusion, these aren't political issues, these are just humanitarian issues. This is just life, isn't it? We need to, you know, realise that. I think as well, brands need to realise that when they're releasing stuff, they're doing it because they want global reach, you know, now, especially when in the age of the internet, but then they want to do that without putting a global face on any of their brand or products. And that's just wild and counterproductive. And it misses out on a huge amount of money they could be making from you know, from various different backgrounds who have the money to spend, and we want to spend the money. But yeah, it's a whole thing. Gosh, that would be a whole other show. We could talk about that, and just a show on just, let's just call out brands that have done shady shit.
I love stories.
Oh my goodness, I have so many, and when I've had to go back and tell my clients, I'm like, oh, I don't sugar the pill. I'm just like, well, here's a screenshot of the email, or here's what they said on the call. So yeah, and some of them, you know, can be upsetting, but you know, it was I suppose it's something they kind of getting more exposed to over time and are starting to understand, etc. And others weren't surprised and then were like, fuck them.
It's definitely like a culture thing.
So
like, I spoke to the diversity and inclusion advisor at T-Mobile a couple of weeks ago to discuss. They won lots of awards in America for inclusion. I think they've won like Forbes awards and things like that. So I thought, right, try and speak to someone who actually gets it on like a company culture level. And that's what we're up against in the influencer industry, is we're working with brands that do not have an inclusive culture that's so deeply ingrained and sunken in. And yes, things are changing, and yes, you know, new people come into the company with much more progressive ideas and understandings, but some companies are 500 years in advance and some are 500 years behind. So what can we affect on an influencer basis? Be pickier about who you work for. That's what we can affect today, and let's tackle culture on a wider scale as we go. You know, it's going to take months and years, but what can influencers affect today? And that's being pickier about who they work for, and being pickier about what they do and what they use their platforms for.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's like, you know, obviously if people want to do things like skinny teas and waist trainers, that's on them. That's something that fully, when I started this agency, when that used to come through to us, I'll be like, no, I'm sorry, we're not doing these. So some influencers we work with did that prior to working with us. But then after, I was like, if you're going to sign here, you can't do that. There's none of that stuff can go on here. And I used to, one of my part-time members of staff is actually, she is an academic doctor. She literally has all the degrees, speaks 6 languages. She was just working with me while she was finishing one of her books, and she wrote a very impassioned essay to people that kept sending us these things about skinny teas and waist trainers, and so that just became our stock response. Brilliant. I mean, I don't think they ever read it because it was fairly long, but it was just it was an amazing way of her just saying, no, and here's all the reasons why your company is wrong, but written in this beautiful way by someone that used to be basically a professor at Oxford. So
can't argue with that.
It was fantastic, and they never contacted us again. Exactly. Okay, so to wrap things up, I've got 2 more questions for you. 1, are there too many influencers? And 2, where do you see influencers / content creators in 10 years' time?
Big. That is big. Are there too many? I don't want to say there are too many, because I feel like it's such an exciting industry that's so accessible to so many people. If you've got a phone and you've got Wi-Fi, it's accessible to you. And what other industry can really have that level of accessibility? So that's something that I'm really happy with and proud of, that we are accessible in that way, that the opportunity is there for people. And you know, new people are starting blogs and Instagram and stuff all the time, and what we teach in Grow and Glow is find your thing that is so unique and so niche, and even if you only appeal to sort of 500 people, but those 500 people will spend money with you for the rest of your life, then you are absolutely laughing, and become an expert in something so specific. I think those opportunities are endless. Are there too many people that just start Instagram because they want free stuff? In my opinion, yes. I think it muddies the kind of what, you know, sustainable content creators are trying to build and trying to use their platforms for. But at the same time, it's a capitalistic world we live in, and we can't blame people for wanting easy access to money. So I don't ever judge those people that are just in it for the money and do just want, you know, in their minds, air quotes, an easy job, because that's the kind of society we live in. But at the same time, it would be nice to change those perceptions and change those expectations, so that we all want more for ourselves and from our platforms and from our like aspirations in that kind of way. So I think that's the first question. And then in 10 years' time, I pretty much feel that every single person on the planet will have an air quotes personal brand, and it will seep through into the, you know, the shops that they shop at, what they post on their social media channels, the perception that they give to the outer world, whether it's to their friends that they're posting to on Facebook or their followers if they grow a following. And I think that a personal brand that starts today and that's still going to be here in 10 years has to have values and transparency and authenticity at the heart, because if they don't have those things, they won't last the 10 years, in my opinion. So yeah, I can see everyone pretty much having a personal brand in 10 years, and it's going to be some of them are going to be excellent, and some of them are going to be world changing, and some of them are going to be those people you see now making a real difference in getting things done and getting things out there, and some won't be, but that's okay too.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. I love that. That was a really that's a really interesting point about everyone like having a personal brand, because essentially everyone is an influencer. Everyone influences someone in their lives, and in terms of from a marketing point of view, you know, nothing is stronger than word of mouth, and essentially using influencers is kind of encouraging someone to use their word of mouth to their personal audience. But I think as people are kind of becoming more au fait with social media, everybody is curating quite heavily, really. There are a few people that, you know, it's like my friend has kids and hers is very just like, there's no filtering at all. But then that's what makes it amazing. And that would, if she was to have a brand, that would be her brand. But yeah, because we are kind of really selective about what we're sharing, essentially, we're all creating our own personal brands, whether that's to become an influencer or just living our lives, it's all there. And yeah, I think I agree with you basically on everything you said about the amount of influencers. There is totally room for it still to grow. And there's room definitely for more content creators, which, you know, people creating amazing content that we can all enjoy is fantastic. And yeah, I think in 10 years time, I also think there will still be influencers that have relevance. I still think there'll still be influencers that are emerging, but I definitely see, I think on top of that, are people just starting a lot of their own brands. I mean, it's happening already with like Genflow. So companies like Genflow are helping influencers literally build their own brands, because they're like, if you have an audience, there's no point in peddling anyone else's products to it. If you want to and can become an entrepreneur, want to peddle your own, you have a built-in audience. You have that built-in loyal, like kind of devotees that will spend on your products. And if you're open and honest about it, and like you were saying, have the right kind of brand principles, etc., then the sky's the limit. And I think that I think the personal brands owned by influencers will start to overtake other brands, like faceless brands. I think that's where I think it's going.
100%. That's exactly what we teach in Grow and Glow, because the way I see it is a platform. The definition of a platform is something to jump off of. So there are so many people out there whose goal in life is to build a platform, and then that's it. They just want 500,000 followers, 500 million followers, and then that's it. Whereas what we teach in Grow and Glow is that's one piece of the pie. Once you've got that platform, you don't have to work for other brands via sponsorships, affiliates, and It's one element, it's one income stream, but why not build it so that you can have a platform that you can jump off your own product, service, business from, because then it is something that you truly own. And, you know, we hear this all the time. If Instagram was going to die tomorrow, and, you know, if social media was going to die tomorrow, what would you have? But that is essentially it. If you've got your personal brand and you've got a product, offer, service, whatever it is that you want to launch, then you've got your own business that you own, and you're not sort of waiting for the next brand to knock on your door. And it's all that kind of like scarcity mindset of who's going to come knocking, whereas you could rely on yourself for your income and for your future. So I hope that's the way it's going, for sure.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I definitely see it going that way. I think it really will. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. This has been such a great chat to have, and I feel like there are so many more chats that we're going to end up having.
Yes, definitely. It's like once you start peeling that onion, there's more and more layers to everything.
So many. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will put all your details in the show notes so everyone can go and follow you and check out Grow and Glow. And if they want to become an influencer, they want to look into it, find out how to be a content creator, I should say, as opposed to influencer, then we can point them in your direction.
We've got you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I love getting all of this stuff off my chest. So yeah, thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, and have a great day, hon.
You too.
Thank you for listening to Speak On. Make sure you like, subscribe and share. And to find out more about us and our upcoming events, please follow us on Instagram, SPEAKON_. Speak On_. Thanks. Bye.